Morley, you're back. It seems like you can't get enough of the Irishness. I can't get rid of you.
I know, right? It's the ire in me, right?
Yeah.
I'm always, yeah, absolutely.
I did. I emailed you last week and I said, Morley, Canada won't let me ship liquids. So I sent you the empty containers and it was a
Okay.
whole rigmarole I had to go through customs and for two empty containers. So I sent them to you. So let me know when you get them.
They're
So I
gonna
had
they're gonna
to,
be right over there. That's where
yeah.
they're headed.
I had to empty them, and here's what I did. I rinsed the can, but I didn't rinse the bottle, so you could still get a bit of the experience.
Thank you. That's great.
But
And that's what I need.
it's such a pain with all these tariffs and everything now on Canada. I've never had to fill in customs for something like this. And they insisted that I do it. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm already paying postage. By the end of it, I said, okay, how much do I owe you for customs? Zero, because they're empty. I'm like, you just wasted 25 minutes of my life. So you better appreciate them.
I will love these things. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I was going to drive. I'm like, if all else fails, I'm driving down there.
There you go, right? That's a bit of a drive, isn't it, from Alberta?
Yeah, but I've loads of podcasts I'd listen to. Be fine.
Okay. All
So
right.
what's new, Morley? You got a new book coming out?
We've got a new book coming out. That'll be November 11th. It'll it's second edition. So what's new about it? It's tighter. We took um, we took a lot of the repeat out of it. Took some of the venom, quite a bit of the venom out of it. Because when that book got written, the first edition, it was 2021.
Mm.
So go back to 2021. What were we all dealing with? And so that was just kind of laced in there. But it's got a really what's exciting is an expanded chapter on why is copper important. There's a chapter on women's health, and then for the gearheads, there's a really tight footnote section. Really, I mean, I think people will be genuinely impressed with the information that's been assembled that takes what we had before, but really expanded it. And I think it's a pretty significant identification of compelling literature that says this is a chapter of medicine that's missing. It's completely lost. And I think it's time for that to change.
You know, Morley, I'm just gonna throw this in. You know, the term gearhead in Dublin is not a term of endearment at all.
Well, it's meant to be a term of endearment. So it's those nerds that love to research and do the actual literature review and stuff like that. So what would be a better
I'll
term?
tell you offline what it means.
Okay, I can't wait to find out.
So we got a few things to discuss. This is our fourth conversation. So I wanted to start off with a summary of everything you've basically discussed so far, but in very basic terms. And I want you to correct me if I'm wrong.
It's fun. That sounds great.
Okay. So first things first is the misconception around iron. Iron for most people is a problem, but we don't see it on a blood test because it's generally sequestered or stored in the tissues. So when we test that on a blood test, it looks like we have low iron, but that is not accurate. What it generally means is that we are copper deficient because you need copper to transport iron through the bloodstream, out of the tissues, through the bloodstream to get where it's supposed to go. On
Right.
top of that, we generally see that low iron is a, shall we say, caused by metabolic dysfunction. The metabolism is not working properly, combined with inflammation. And then we could get into the hormonal conversation that estrogen dominance is involved there.
Right.
That's my summary of it.
That's a great summary. And what I've been working on of late is it's going to be an online class on um, I call it iron deficiency anemia. Is there more to the story? And there is, and you've just captured it. Your summation is excellent. Um, here's what I've learned of late. It isn't just low copper that can cause this phenomenon. It can be low retinol that's equally as powerful for a variety of reasons. Um, Pathogens can have this effect, as you would expect. They give off something called lipopolysaccharides, and that sends the immune system into orbit, and that is going to create hepcidin. Hepcidin is going to come out of the woodwork, and that's what's going to cause the sequestration of iron that you're talking about. But
Because it causes massive systemic inflammation as well.
right, that's right. And what the hepcidin does is it shuts down the doorway to let iron out. That's the most important thing, is the iron can't get out, can't recycle. But there's a fourth dimension that will really put all this into play, and it's stress.
Mm.
And I found articles on what's called chronic social defeat stress and repeated restraint stress. Go back to 2020. That's exactly what we experienced. Those were the two forms of stress that we were experiencing. You can't go to work, don't leave your home, don't get within 6 feet, and all the other mandates. Those were all manifestations of those two triggers of stress. They cause interleukin 6, which is an immune marker, to go into orbit, which then sends hepcidin into orbit, which then sends iron into the subbasement. And it shows low on the blood test, but it's building in the tissue. And so these are the four big contributors to this whole dynamic. And I take the stance, a very controversial stance. I don't think there's such a thing as iron deficiency anemia on this
Yeah.
planet. I don't think the term would be absolute iron deficiency versus what we're talking about is functional iron deficiency. When it's stuck in the tissue because of this hormonal mechanism called hepcidin that's been triggered by the immune system, that's a functional issue. It's not an absolute deficiency or lack of the metal. And the go-to response, which I think is really, I think it borders on sinful. The go-to response in every case, whenever you see low iron, low hemoglobin, or low ferritin, give that person iron.
Mm-hmm.
That is not the answer. We need to understand what's really behind this. And it turns out that the hepcidin can be measured in the blood. Wow, didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Interleukin 6 can be measured in the blood.
I knew that, but I've never seen hepcidin.
I know, right? And so it turns out that this interleukin 6, which is it's in the literature, every article I ever read on iron and inflammation mentions interleukin 6.
Yeah, that's what I was
It's,
going to say is IL-6 is more commonly recognized an inflammatory marker. So what
exactly.
you're saying is IL-6 increases, and back to what I said in the summary, that's going to affect or drive up inflammation, which again is a factor in sequestering iron into the tissues. Because
Exactly.
as well, iron, not iron, systemic inflammation will also down level the ability of the thyroid to work properly as well. So there you have that metabolic dysfunction too.
That's exactly right. And so it's the important thing for your listeners, for your community, is to know that stress, chronic stress, which we're all guilty of, will trigger iron dysregulation. And what people have got to do is ask the question, why is my iron low? And I would be willing to bet that 99 times out of 100, it has nothing to do with iron status because we're surrounded by iron on the planet. It's being fortified in our food. It's in our supplements. It's so pervasive in our overall environment that if we're not metabolizing it, it's back to one of those four factors: copper, retinol, stress, or the pathogens.
And iron accumulation, from my point of view, is reflective in rusting when we think of a gait, rusting and creaking and aches and pains in a human. Most people have a lot of aches and pains and systemic inflammation. And then we look at most women that at least I speak to, and remembering I only speak to
Good,
people that have issues. Healthy people generally don't come to us.
good.
Most women have some sort of menstrual issue with heavy bleeding, and then they think that they have got anemia, that they're losing a lot of iron. But the truth is, all of these symptoms are reflective of this iron overload.
That's absolutely the case. And the health community has been trained to always default to anemia, an absolute lack of iron. But they're not doing the proper testing, in my opinion, to get at the interleukin 6 or get at the hepcidin to say, could in fact there be another explanation for this? Are there other nutrients or other aspects of this person's life? And how many practitioners take the time to say, tell me about your stress? What are you going through? What's happening in your life these days? You know, you've got a stopwatch, you've got 7 minutes or whatever it is in a typical setting. They don't have a lot of opportunity to really delve into the true nature of that person's life.
And then how they perceive stress and we perceive stress. I actually was in the gym this morning and I shouldn't have opened my mouth. I said, I'm a magnet for people. Everybody wants to talk to me. People just attracted to me. And I shouldn't have said it because then everybody and their dog stopped to talk to me this morning. And I'm running out the door and I say bye to one of the guys in the gym. And this girl
Yeah,
just stops me going out the door and she's like, lovely girl, I love your arms. Could you give me some tips? And I'm like, you know what? I'm happy to talk to you. I really am. But I have to go talk to Morley. I can't hang around here. And I could feel my stress going up. And it was obviously a good stress. But I speak to people all the time, Morley, about 2020, 2021, and they'll say, oh, yeah, that didn't stress me too much. I was just at home with my kids and having a great time. And I'm like, no, just because you think it didn't stress you, how could it not? We were waking up every morning thinking we were going to die. Like, how could it
right.
not affect you? And that goes back to how people perceive stress. But you're kidding yourself if you think that didn't affect you on a cellular level, because it totally did.
Of course it did. And just we have not been taught how powerful this response to stress can be. And what's also useful is when we're under stress, we burn through a very important hormone called cortisol. I just learned recently, it's fascinating. Excuse me, I've often wondered what was our connection between vitamin A and cortisol. And it turns out that the enzyme to create cortisol requires vitamin A. It's called the star enzyme. And it's like, oh my gosh. Suddenly we have this whole mechanism of if we're in this constant stress pattern, we're burning up our retinol. Who's talking about that? Who's telling us to take more retinol in our diet? Very few practitioners focus on that. What do they focus on? D. They always jump to vitamin D, not knowing that that's going to block the retinol that's needed to support the production of cortisol.
And then what happens to people after they go through periods of high cortisol or stress? They end up getting sick, either a head cold, a flu, because they've burned through their vitamin A, and vitamin A is very important for the immune system.
Absolutely. Insanely important. And the difference between A and D is that um, A will downregulate the immune system. Vitamin D suppresses it. There's a difference between suppression and downregulation. So for those who are curious about that, downregulation is singing a lullaby to someone who's trying to go to sleep. Suppression is putting a pillow over their head. Very different, very different way of getting people to sleep, right?
That's a nice
So,
analogy.
well, no, but I think people need that kind of graphic example to realize that this obsession with D is very it's been distorted. That's the only word I can use. The people's understanding of vitamin D is a distortion of the truth. So
So, you mentioned that you've added in your new book a section for women.
yeah,
And I've heard you say before that estrogen dominance is iron dominance. I'm sure
yes,
you've included that in your new section. You want to go into a bit on what you mean by
sure.
that?
Yeah. So the again, the default mindset is everything's run by hormones. No, hormones are responding to the mineral imbalances in the body. And so when you there is absolutely a connection with cortisol and stress, and there's a connection with estrogen and
Oh,
stress.
yeah.
And it turns out that in a body that has low copper, which most bodies have, you're going to have low ceruloplasmin, the copper protein. We've talked about that.
Hmm.
And ceruloplasmin is the master antioxidant protein, has, has a tremendous influence in our body to deal with the rusting that you were talking about. And when copper is low, ceruloplasmin will be low. Well, the body always has a backup plan. And the backup plan for low ceruloplasmin is estrogen. Estrogen is an antioxidant. I would argue that all of the all of the hormones that we're familiar with respond to oxidative stress,
Hmm.
different dimensions of oxidative stress, and their job is to try to bring the minerals back to deal with that. Well, people that have estrogen dominance also have adrenaline dominance. Wonderful book on that. And they also have iron dominance. And it all aligns around lack of copper, high iron. Again, a lot of this dynamic is taking place in the tissue. It may not show up in the blood. And we've got to get beyond this idea that the blood is the tell all medium. It's not. It's giving us one dimension of what's going on in the body. We don't have a crystal ball to go into the tissue to see, other than doing needle biopsies or Tesla 2 MRIs, we don't have the ability to take a look in the tissue and see what's going on inside the cellular dynamics. And this idea that the blood is the definitive marker, it's not. It's very helpful, but you have to know how to interpret it and you have to know what it's not telling you. And I think, particularly around the iron, it's not telling us about the iron that's been sequestered that you talked about from the very beginning. And that sequestered iron starts to accumulate, starts to fester, starts to create symptoms. And that's the part that we need to be mindful of to begin to bring all this back into balance by focusing on what's the job of copper, what's the job of retinol, what's the job of magnesium to deal with these dynamics and bring the homeostasis back into the physiology of the body.
A lot of the time, I think these blood tests are a fool's errand because, like you said, unless you have a practitioner that can decipher it properly and combine it with the symptom picture, which most people are not, most doctors are not, then you're wasting your time because you're not going to get the answers you're looking for. Two things there, and I said this on a group call last night, and this is how I describe it. I generally describe estrogen, adrenaline, thyroid, and all as a coin. On one side of the coin, you have estrogen dominance and you have adrenaline dominance. And then on the other side of the coin, you have low progesterone and low thyroid. And I
Yeah,
guess now I'm going to add in iron dominance on this side of the coin as well. But that
and copper
everything you
deficiency.
said
Yeah,
circles back to the thyroid and metabolic dysfunction as well.
absolutely. And the part that people need to understand to really have a more complete appreciation is that when vitamin A is low, it will cause hypothyroidism. It will cause a low thyroid function.
I'm going to
And
stop you, Morley, if you don't mind, let me stop you there for a second. You know what originally got me onto that idea of the connection between vitamin A and thyroid? About 5 years ago, I noticed this woman clearly had hypothyroidism. She had edema everywhere. She had inflammation at the top of her skull, her scalp, very inflamed, but she kept breaking out in yeast infections. And I came across some research showing that if you high dose retinol, it can help to get rid of a yeast infection. So I put her on 60,000. And
Oh,
lo and behold, she started to also lose weight and get rid of the yeast infection. So that's where I saw that connection with the immune system as well. But that was a good 5 years ago.
that's a wonderful find. I'd love to know that research study. But the connection is the the process of making T4. When you get into the gene, the, the gene needs to be transcribed.
Mhm.
And to transcribe the instructions from the messenger RNA, you have to have a thyroid receptor and you have to have RXR. And that's a nuclear receptor made from retinol. It's a derivative of retinol. And RXR and TR need to bind up together, and then the transcription can begin. You can start to make thyroid hormone. And if you don't have the retinol in the diet, then you're not going to have the ability to transcribe the gene. The other side of it is there's a wonderful study done by Jens Maytag. He's over in Germany. And in 2012, he wrote a wonderful article about the relationship of copper to the thyroid. And again, a lot of misunderstanding about the role of copper, but the mechanism to make iodine into iodine requires copper. Very important mechanism there. And the where a lot of the breakdown that takes place in people's thyroid metabolism is happening in the liver. And so the conversion of T4 to T3, 90% of that's happening in the liver. And that enzyme is called a selenoenzyme. They love to always tell it to try iodinase enzyme is selenium dependent, but it doesn't work without copper. That's established in the literature. And what's high in a body with reverse T3? They got a lot of iron in their liver. Well, why do they have a lot of iron in their liver? Because they don't have enough copper in their diet. And so the lack of copper allows iron to build. What's that going to do? It's also going to affect retinol status. So the rising iron is going to affect copper and retinol. And you've got multiple facets of thyroid dysfunction. And people are just told to take more iodine and take more selenium. It's like, no, there's more to the story. That's what I think people need to be asking is, are there other aspects of this breakdown of my body that I've not been aware of? Or is there a price to pay, like you're saying, with the stress and the estrogen dominance? Well, why is that happening? And again, the iron side of the equation is overlooked by most practitioners. And most people don't know. They're convinced they're anemic and they're not aware of the sequestered iron, the hidden iron that's been tucked away for safekeeping. That's what sequester means. It's a Latin term for put it in safekeeping until the problem is resolved. And
Mhm.
the body's really smart. The immune system is incredibly adept at knowing whether the person is under stress or not, regardless of what the source of stress might be.
Mhm. The more we speak, Morley, it reminds me of that. I think it was Einstein who said, "The more I learn, the more I realize, the less I know." And it
Right.
really, you
Oh,
can you
absolutely.
can see why it's so overwhelming for the general population. 'And I feel like the general population, when they hear practitioners talk, their initial response is, "Okay, what supplement can I take for that?" And if you took a supplement for everything we talk about, you'd be broke for a start. And that's why it's so important to make sure you're getting a lot of this through your nutrition. It just makes it so much easier. But that, as we see, is the biggest challenge for most people nowadays.
No, there's no question about it. I think um, what we've done within the root cause protocol is zero in on a finite number of nutrients. And we really encourage people to adopt an ancestral diet, right? And what letter starts that word? A.
Vitamin A.
And Weston A. Price was very focused on retinol. And I think the unfortunate part of his research is he didn't know about the minerals. I think if he'd had more time, he would have gotten to the minerals and he would have known this very powerful relationship between copper and retinol. In the same way that there's a very powerful relationship between iron and vitamin D. People need to know that having a relationship with iron through vitamin D is like that should make people kind of sit up and their sphincter should tighten, saying, "Well, wait, well, what does that mean?" And so it turns out that vitamin D drives iron deeper in the tissue. That's not good. And people don't realize that really what runs our iron metabolism is a dynamic recycling of iron, a constant circulation of iron. We don't, and the obsession in the modern era is to store that iron. No, that's not the object. We're storing iron in the liver. That's not a good thing because it's going to affect the ability to store copper and retinol, which the liver was designed for. I mean, the liver will take on iron, but it should not be a depot full of iron. That has caused, I think, a lot of dysregulation in a lot of people's body because of
There-
that.
There's a lot of conflicting evidence about vitamin D, and every time we talk, someone messages me asking, why does Morley basically hate vitamin D? I'm like, he doesn't hate vitamin D, it's in context. But do you think that vitamin D, because I don't think there's been any large scale studies on this, that vitamin D is problematic for everybody? And then considering people who live in the northern latitudes who don't get a lot of sun, then there's diet and lifestyle and everything. Like there's clearly a lot of research for all the pros of supplementing with, and I'll add in a really good vitamin D, especially if you don't get out in the sun at all.
Well, my whole issue is uh, I'm a firm believer in yin and yang, and I think magnesium and calcium are partners.
Mhm.
Sodium and potassium, partners. Uh, Copper and iron are partners, not copper and zinc. That's a complete distortion created by Carl Pfeiffer back in the 60s. Copper and iron are the partners, and vitamin A and D are partners. And my whole issue is the D only focus. The testing is only a vitamin D, the supplementation is only a vitamin D, and they've completely expunged vitamin A from the record. The irony is, back in the 20s, when vitamin A was being discovered, and people were getting Nobel Prizes for it, you know what they were doing with the vitamin D? They were throwing it away. They weren't even analyzing it. And then, of course, everything changed back probably around the 60s. But the thing is, it isn't that I don't like vitamin D. I know it's important, but what people need to know is the yin yang of it. When you go out in the sunlight, there's two things that happen. The sunlight activates the B9, the folate in your body. And guess what folate has? It has copper in it. It's copper dependent. So it activates the folate to do two things. The folate stimulates the production of vitamin D. That's a good thing. But it also stimulates the breakdown of vitamin A into the the retinoic acids, into the nuclear receptors. There are dozens of metabolites that are made from that retinol that really drive so much of our immune system in the body. And so people have been taught to ride a unicycle of D. They've not been taught about the importance of a bicycle of A and D. And I think that's where the mistake is. So I I have been criticized for my anti-D stance. I'm used to it, but it's been influenced by a lot of important research. And for those that really want to dive deep into this, there is a masterclass on our website, the rcp123.org. There's a masterclass on vitamin D, and it's a 90-minute class to teach people that there's more to the story, and then they can make their own decision. And usually when people get that information like that, they realize, this cod liver oil looks like a really good deal. I'm getting A and D, and that's really what we promote. But there's only 3 brands that we stand behind. And there's probably over 100 that are available. And people need to know that there's a difference between Rosita's and Formula IQ and Jigsaw cod liver oil and all the others that are out there. They just need to know that there is a difference. And when you're dealing with health issues, it comes down to, what do I need to do to improve the engineering activity of my body? Well, then you better find the best engineered nutrients you can find. Don't, what used to frustrate me years ago in my early days of consulting was people would go to AutoZone and they'd buy the most expensive oil for their car, get a real high-end motor oil. Then they would drive down the street and go to Walmart to buy their supplements. And I said, stop that. I said, buy the cheapest oil you can find, get plastic oil, that's all you need, and put your money invested in better supplements. So it's just getting people to reverse their thinking is so
Yeah,
important.
so it's not that you hate vitamin D. It's
No.
just that in isolation, you don't think it's a good idea, and people need to understand there needs to be some retinol there as well to support its activity. Another thing, and Dr. Jack Cruz speaks about this a lot, is the UV rays also stimulate mitochondrial action at the level of the skin, which further helps with metabolic function. And
Yep.
UV rays are also pro-thyroid, so that also helps with metabolic function as well.
But again, I would argue, I'm completely on board with Jack Cruz about the stimulation of the mitochondria. I mean, they are very light sensitive creatures, but the issue with the thyroid is we're back to sunlight activates the breakdown of retinol, and it stimulates the production of retinoic acids and these receptors. The RXR has to be created in our body once the breakdown of the retinol starts.
Mhm.
Retinol is stored in the liver. That's where it's designed to be stored in the liver. And with proper sunlight, that whole mechanism, hey, we need some RXR in the thyroid, starts to break down in the liver and finds its way up to the thyroid. It isn't that the thyroid, because it gets light,
Mhm.
suddenly can think. It's getting the nutrients and the cofactors that are so important for its function.
Yeah. So I heard you mention, because we already discussed testing the blood, which people are obsessed with, and then you said that should make people's sphincters tighten as well, which made me think of something else I heard you say recently about iron being stored in the gut. And of course, we're not testing for iron in the gut either. Nobody's doing that. So, what did you mean by iron being stored in the gut? And do you think this is an aspect in what we were saying with lipopolysaccharides and the inflammatory markers?
Right. Great question. The the process of getting iron absorbed is a two-step process. So in our gut are cells called enterocytes. Enterocyte. Cyte is cell, and these are the cells that allow the nutrients to come into the body. And so if these are two enterocytes, and they've got the villi, and the nutrients come down through the villi and then come into the enterocyte, right? Oops, got it this way. So in order to, most of the iron that we're exposed to is in a +3 state. It's called ferric iron.
Mm.
Iron fortification, iron supplementation is usually ferric iron. So it needs to be chemically reduced and goes from a +3 state to a +2 state, and it becomes a ferrous iron. And then it can come into the enterocyte. Once it gets into the enterocyte, the cell needs to decide, are we going to store it in ferritin, or are we going to release it into the bloodstream, depending upon what the need is. In order to put it into ferritin, you have to have an enzyme called ferroxidase, which is copper dependent. And the iron needs to be changed back from +2 to +3. So the term uses, we're oxidizing iron. So we're going from +2 to +3. So it can go into ferritin. Or if the body decides, no, I don't need to store it, I will allow it into the bloodstream. Well, the doorway to let it into the bloodstream is called ferroportin, iron doorway, ferro iron portin doorway. That doorway only opens when the enzyme or the protein is called hephaestin, and hephaestin is a cousin of ceruloplasmin. They're very similar in their structure, and their function is identical in that they both will allow the ferrous iron to become ferric iron, so it can go through the doorway, and then when it's ferric iron, it can be loaded onto transferrin, and so that transferrin, it's called diferric 2 +3 irons, diferric transferrin goes to the bone marrow so it can be made into new red blood cells.
Mm-hmm.
The process of absorption is all of that. It isn't just getting it into the enterocyte. Where I think the breakdown is in people's body is they can get into the cell, but it struggles to get into ferritin, and it goes into what's called the labile iron pool. That should make people really nervous. Labile, well, one definition is free, happy. Another, if you're coming at it as a scientist, it means highly reactive. That's what labile really means to a chemist. Labile iron pool is a collection of iron that's highly reactive, and it will create oxidative stress, which will create symptoms of gut dysbiosis and colitis and Crohn's and so on and so forth. And so if the iron can't get stored, or if it can't get released, then it's going to build up in the enterocyte. And why is it building? Because of a lack of bioavailable copper. Again, the issue is people need to understand that every facet of iron metabolism is copper dependent. That copper is the general, iron's the foot soldier. And the analogy that I'm now using is, if you really want to understand this, think about General Patton in the Second World War. He had hundreds of tanks under his command. What are tanks made out of? Iron. Yeah, they're really, really thick with iron. And he was legendary. He was actually the most feared general by the Germans because he was unpredictable but always successful. They didn't know where he was going to go. But he always had a plan, and I think that is the issue with copper. Copper is part of our innate intelligence. That's really what the book Cure Your Fatigue. It's about awakening this innate wisdom that we have and giving it the energy and the nutrients that it needs in order to do its work properly. And so this dynamic is very important to understand as it relates to the gut. And anyone, I probably have worked with over 100 people who had gut dysbiosis. And what do they all have in common? An unresolved emotional event. And I'll always ask them, what is it you can't stomach in your life? And 100% of them have been able to tell me what it is. I said, then get to a practitioner who does emotional release and let go of the fear that you're carrying because you can't resolve that issue. And that fear, we spell it F-E-A-R, because when you're in a state of fear, you become a magnet for iron, especially in your gut. And so we've got to deal with that frontline event to ease the burden that iron puts on our metabolism. And the thing is, we can't live without iron. It's absolutely central to our physiology. It's the waiter carrying the oxygen, it's the waiter carrying the carbon dioxide. It's got all sorts of functions in the body with heme and iron sulfur clusters. It has so many important functions, but quietly in the background, invariably, is some copper enzyme that's allowing that to happen. And they love to, the analogy that I think is so important is everyone has a stove in their kitchen, right? What's the stove made of? Iron. It's made of steel. It's always made of steel. And so what organized medicine has done is put a spotlight on the stove, and then it's fair to ask the question, does the stove know what's for dinner? No. Does the stove know what temperature the oven should be on? No. Does the stove know what burner to put on? No. But the chef does. And when you get inside the mitochondria, you get into complex 4, which is a stove. It's exactly what it is. It's two heme groups, heme A and heme A3, and they're holding oxygen. They're holding a molecule of oxygen. And guess who's slicing and dicing that oxygen and turning it into 2 molecules of water? Copper. And that is its role going back to the beginning of time, to the very beginning of time. And organized medicine just wants you to know the stove is making it happen. And um, they're expunging the chef from the process. And I think that's wrong. I think it's time for people to know the totality of what runs our physiology and to begin to balance the narrative with nature. And nature has very powerful forces in our body that run our immune system, that run our mitochondria, that run our response to the stress that we're constantly under. And almost invariably, we've got to be able to make energy and we've got to have resilience in order to respond to that. And that comes from very sophisticated signaling from copper dependent enzymes, which is not easily found in conventional textbooks. In fact, I did a test with AI. Again, garbage in, garbage out, right? But what we can do with AI is some pretty cool stuff. So a neighbor, a dear friend of mine, who's very good with research, I said, let's peek into the top 10 medical textbooks and the top 10 nutritional textbooks. And we're looking for two words, ceruloplasmin and nutritional immunity. The nutritional immunity was developed by Ed Weinberger at Indiana University, based on research that was in the 70s, based on research from the 40s. And the basis of nutritional immunity is you do not eat a substance that feeds pathogens. And guess what's driving iron sequestration in response to stress? Nutritional immunity. That's really what it is. It's the wisdom of the body knowing, wait a minute, I got a predator, I've got a stress, I've got a lack of
So do you
nutrients.
mean it's people not feeding nutritional immunity, basically people eating crap food? Because that
Well,
would,
they're eating crap food, but they're eating crap food that's filled with iron.
yeah, and that's preventing us from having nutritional immunity.
Correct. Right. And so the nutritional immunity is the immune system saying, ooh, I better take this iron offline and protect you from the pathogens that are going to come with it.
Mhm.
And Guess how many of the 20 textbooks had mentions of ceruloplasmin and nutritional immunity?
None.
None. Big goose egg. And so that's the blind spot running organized medicine and nutrition is, well, let's not talk about this ceruloplasmin thing. And let's not talk about this nutritional immunity thing, which is, those are epic signs of intelligence, incredibly powerful. But what does ceruloplasmin and nutritional immunity provide to the human? Sovereignty. And they're not big on that. They give us independence, and we're not dependent on the system because we have an operating system that knows what to do.
In this day and age, though, Morley, if people knew about this, how much of a difference do you think it would make to people's choices?
Fair question. Sadly, I think that out of 100 people,
Too.
95 to 98, they'll do what they're told. Two to five will say, "Wait a minute, oh, then I can solve this problem," and they perk right up. But the majority, no. But when more and more people start to do it, and the laggards, as I call them, find out that it's okay to do it, then they'll follow suit. But they're not going to stick their neck out. And so it's waking up the early adopters and the late adopters. That's really what our work is to get that. There's an absolute bell-shaped curve on adoption. You probably have seen it. And the early adopters and the late adopters are pivotal in society taking on new understanding about how to solve a problem. And that's right where we are.
So I suppose you could say the work we're doing is in a way we're trying to influence time and time's outcomes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
I was recently chatting with Gabe Brown, who wrote a wonderful book, Dirt to Soil. He's a 40-year veteran of farming, wonderful guy. And he's in Bismarck, North Dakota, probably not too far from where you are. And
I'm in Calgary, Morley.
well, you're in Calgary. Okay. All right. Um, and so he was really, his whole emphasis is getting people to realize that this wisdom resides in the soil, but you got to wake it up. It's got to have the right microbes and the right flora and, inside the microbes to make sure that that happens. And it's very predictable. He said, once you aliven the soil, and you don't need to be tilling it, plowing it. And he said, just let it be, but give it the nutrients, which largely comes from animal manure. And suddenly the field changes. And it's a very powerful phenomenon. It doesn't need to be complicated. And the point that he makes in his book, which I think is really important, he years ago, 30 years ago, connected with another farmer from Canada, and his name was Don Campbell. And Don Campbell said, if you want to make a small improvement in your activity, change the way you do things. If you want to make a big change in what you're doing, change how you see things. And that's what we're really trying to do is get people to see that there's a whole nother way of understanding our metabolism and how our body responds to stress. And that what we are uh, receiving by way of information from the internet is very scripted. It is a narrative, and it's very carefully selected so that we don't have the totality of understanding about what's going on.
So I wanted to ask you a bit of a selfish question. So this is for me.
Yeah, sure.
Remember, I told you in all the other conversations we had that I take a lot of chlorophyll. I get a lot of my copper from chlorophyll and dark chocolates. And over the summer, with the price of everything, I was like, I'm going to stop taking this chlorophyll, but I'm going to replace it with this other liquid greens that had this, and it had chlorophyll in it. So I'm like, it's probably the same, and I'm probably getting some extra benefits. The chlorophyll, of course, was lower. And I'm wondering, I'm curious as to your opinion on this. Over the last few weeks, I started noticing a lot of hair loss, like a
Oh,
lot, which is new for me. Because I'm Irish, I have thick hair. But it was a lot. I'm like, "Oh, I'm going bald." But I
yeah.
also noticed, and I know chlorophyll is an internal deodorizer and supports liver function and everything. I also noted I started getting a lot of skin breakouts, and I don't get skin breakouts. I have very good skin. Um, and I was wondering, could this be because I'm not getting as much copper because I'm not getting as much chlorophyll? And again, I have liver issues. I told you about this before because I have hypothyroid, but I'm on my game. But usually a breakout, especially premenstrual breakouts, hormonal, is going to tell me my liver is not functioning optimally, and that's being presented in my face. Do you think there's a connection there? Because it's not like me. Usually I'm tip-top shape.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's been a change. Obviously, you've changed the supplement. I wonder if there's been a change in your stress.
No.
That would be something.
I've
Okay.
lost weight. I was wondering if it's that I lost body fat. Like I'm good with everything. Like I sleep amazing, 9 hours sleep at night. My HRV is over 100. I exercise, I walk, I do everything. So I was narrowing down what did I change. And then they did add fluoride to the water in Calgary. So I was wondering if it was that because I haven't got a whole house filter. I've only got a filter reverse osmosis in the kitchen. So I'm like, is that what's causing it as well?
It could very well be a factor. No question that you've changed the chlorophyll. In the chlorophyll you were taking, was there chlorophyll in it?
Yes. Yeah. And I would be taking a tablespoon a day. The recommended dose is a teaspoon, but I'm like an overachiever, so I was doing more.
Okay, you're doing three.
And I
So
do eat
then,
green vegetables. I eat a lot of red meat. I eat a lot of fruit. I also get like greens from other areas and like spirulina. I eat a lot of dark chocolate. Like I feel like that was it. So I have bought a bottle of my chlorophyll to start again. I'm hoping that's what it was.
do you know if with this replacement chlorophyll, did that have chlorophyll in as well?
It doesn't say, it just says like alfalfa, chlorophyll, spinach, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't specify. But the other one I used to take does.
So it would be worth, if you're able to contact the second company, ask them, what is the chlorophyll in content of this product? They should be able to tell you. There's an analysis that's been done of that product. They should be able to tell you very specifically. The other option is to take a copper supplement, like Recuperate or something like that, just to make sure you're getting the copper that you need to support your system.
Yeah.
Uh, which we talk about in the root cause protocol all the time.
I feel like it was a fool's errand thinking, well, I'm getting all these other nutrients in this bottle, but it turned out that actually getting a higher dose of chlorophyll and only chlorophyll was more beneficial than the shiny stuff on the other bottle.
Right. So what is your TSH? Where does that typically run?
Oh, my TSH right now is around 1 or lower. I'm pretty good. I
Okay.
also take natural desiccated thyroid. Like I do.
Okay. So
So
the
it's not my
lower the
thyroid. It's definitely
no,
not thyroid. I know
no.
like my energy's great. My expenditure is great. Everything's great. It's definitely I f- it's either going to be that or the fluoride
And the fluoride was just recently added.
in June, the end of June, yeah.
Okay. Well, it's no friend to copper.
I know.
Right?
It's
No, no, no.
last question I wanted to ask you, Morley. I've kind of been on a cancer kick the last few months, just trying to get as much opinions and ideas and information around cancer as I can for my followers, because as we know, cancer is the new TB.
Yeah.
But um, what I wanted to ask you was the connection between high iron and cancer. And you mentioned oxidative stress, and that's a big kind of argument from Warburg is how oxidative stress affects the cells. And cancer is not caused by just one thing, it's an accumulation of things. But let's hear what you have to say.
Cancer, we have to talk about cancer metabolism. Cancer as a concept, as a disease, I don't think exists, but the metabolism does exist.
Mm.
And it's anaerobic metabolism. And people have probably have heard of the Warburg effect. They've heard of Otto Warburg, most likely, famous scientist and physician from the 1910s to the 1980s. He was very active, very probably one of the most decorated scientists in the history of the modern era. And he had three passions. He loved to study photosynthesis. He loved to study what's called oxidative phosphorylation, the process of making ATP in the mitochondria. And he loved to study cancer. And in his mind, they were the same thing. They were just derivatives of each other, which is kind of an amazing thing. And there's a great book for people, for those that like to read. It's called Ravenous, and the author's name is Sam Apple. It's a wonderful book. It's a biography about Otto Warburg, but it laced within the book is this cancer dynamic that he was studying. And one of his famous statements was to the 1966 um, body of Nobel laureates. Uh, they were in this very elegant lodge in Europe. And he said, "Oh, the cure for cancer is easy." But he wouldn't tell them what it was. And so when you pull the curtain back, you find out that um, there's a buildup of iron in cancer metabolism. But the real trigger uh, is lack of retinol. And at the time that he was being considered for his initial Nobel prizes, he actually only got one, but he was nominated in the like 26. That was his first nomination of 52 Nobel prizes, but he only got one because Hitler said one was enough, and because he was a German Jew, and Hitler kept him alive because he knew that he could cure cancer. And little known fact, both of Hitler's parents died of cancer. So he was terrified of cancer. That was one of his greatest fears. And so he kept Warburg around for safekeeping. And in 1925, uh, a physician named Montrose T. Burroughs, he was a 1909 graduate of Hopkins, published an article about retinol deficiency causing cancer. Wow. 1926, he publishes 4 articles. Retinol deficiency causes cancer. 1926, Otto Warburg is competing with Johannes Fibinger for the Nobel Prize as to what causes cancer.
Mm.
And Warburg is taking the position it's metabolic, it's an energy issue.
Mm.
And Fibinger says, no, actually, it's a parasite. And there was no medal given in 1926. They didn't resolve the debate until 1927. And Fibinger got the award, got the Nobel, which enraged Warburg. And then Fibinger recounted his whole position about parasites. And he must have caught wind of the research by Dr. Burroughs. He said he publishes an article in 1928 saying, yeah, it's retinol deficiency that causes cancer. And about 4 months after he published that article, he was dead. And then we fast forward to 2016. So we come 90 years into the future, and a German scientist named Ulrich Hammerling, very smart guy, he explains exactly what Burroughs was talking about. Inside the mitochondria is called the electron transport chain. We have complexes 1 through 5. Complex 1 through 4 is considered um, the, the primary complexes. And when it gets attached to complex 5, you have what's called oxidative phosphorylation. You have in 1 through 4, you're moving oxygen, and then once the oxygen becomes water at complex 4, then you can release the energy molecules, ATP, that are being made in complex 5.
Mhm.
And it turns out that retinol is part of something called the signalosome, signal ozone, SOME. And the bottom half of that signalosome, it's a 4-part mechanism, but the bottom half of it is a retinol molecule. And the electrons that are riding through the complex, but especially the electrons from complex 3 to get over to complex 4, which are so important, ride the carbon tail of retinol. And if retinol is not there, Dr. Hamelin says, this is the Warburg effect. It's the breakdown of the electron flow. And that when that happens on a big enough scale, you're going to have a collapse of ATP production. Lactic acid is going to rise 70-fold. Guess what lactic acid does? It causes the anemia of cancer because lactic acid causes hepcidin to go back into orbit. And what's happening inside the tissue? It's filling with iron,
Mhm.
filling with iron. And it's choking whatever oxygen might be there. And that's the true essence of the Warburg effect, is that even though oxygen is present, the cancer is choosing to make energy anaerobically. Why would that be? Because there's not enough bioavailable copper to spark it, to make it happen. And so, complete misunderstanding today. And now, what oncologists are trained to do is blame copper for the cancer because of angiogenesis and of the reactive oxygen species. And they completely ignore the rising level of iron. They completely ignore the absence of retinol in the tissue. They like to put the spotlight on copper and say, see, that's where the problem is. And what are all of their techniques, whether it is chemotherapy or radiation? Take the copper out of the tissue.
Poison the
Chemotherapy, yeah, but the way it's poisoning it is it's chelating the copper, taking it out, and radiation therapy chelate kills the copper. That's what the problem is with radiation. Is it kills the copper that's so important for our physiology.
and it kills immune cells that are already struggling because they don't
And
have
they
enough vitamin A.
exactly, and they also need copper. Copper is very important for immune function, insanely important. During COVID, I did research in the first few months of COVID and found 52 different articles proving that copper was regulating the immune system.
So interesting because these oncologists will and researchers will also point the finger at sugar too. And
For sure.
sugar doesn't cause cancer. And I'm not talking about junk food and crappy food, but sugar is essential for optimal metabolic function, especially the thyroid. Again, not talking about junk food or anything, but they will demonize that as well, further down regulating the metabolic cellular function too, causing more lactic acid to be affected and anaerobism. And it's just when I think of, like I said already, Morley, the more I talk to you, the more I realize I know nothing.
No. You actually know quite a bit. Don't lose sight of the fact that all of the things we've talked about intersect with each other. It is don't put them in a separate mailbox in a post office. These are all fusing together. And the part that's important from the book on ravenous that really struck me is they want you to believe that the cancer cell is ravenous for sugar.
Mhm.
I think it's ravenous for iron and sugar. It isn't just sugar. And there's a very tight connection between iron and sugar and fat and copper. And if you don't have copper in your diet, you can't metabolize the fat in your diet. And you can't metabolize the fat in your body. And that's really what we're designed to do. But when you can't burn fat, you got to get carbs. You got to get fuel from something, and you're going to go to carbs. And that's where the breakdown is becoming too dependent on the carbohydrates as a source of fuel.
You know, it's interesting that that book is called Ravenous. I don't know if you've read Susan Sontag's book, Illness as a Metaphor, and she
No.
is very good, lovely, lovely read because she is a journalist and it's really a compilation of articles, basically her thoughts on paper. And she is looking at the metaphors and connection and familiarity between TB back in the 18 and 1900s and the connection between cancer nowadays, but referring to both as a disease of consumption. And
Right.
ravenous and consumption, I would categorize them as meaning almost the same thing. You like that?
Totally.
It's great. Anyway, Morley, another great chat. What I've gathered from this is that it's going to take all of the things to optimize human health and human body. But if you take or do all of the things, all of those things will do all of the things for you. So it's not like you said, all in one mailbox like your iron brew containers are. It's, and this is what people don't get. They think, oh, vitamin D only does this, iron only does this, vitamin it doesn't. We do all the things, so they do all the things for us.
That's exactly right. And we need to understand that it doesn't, you don't need to be worried about 1,000 things. There only are 14 stops in the root cause protocol, and there are about a dozen starts. It isn't hundreds and hundreds of things that we have to focus on. And when you go through a very disciplined application of those stops and starts, people start to feel better. They have more energy. Their symptoms start to melt away. And central to our program is letting go of the fear and the iron. You've got to do that in addition to taking supplements. If you don't do that, you're not going to get the full benefit of what we talk about in terms of you've got to reduce the fear because it's a magnet for the iron, and you've got to absolutely engage in reducing the iron.
I think
Absolutely essential.
I think if I was to say that, I'd say you either need to deal with your emotions or you need to let them go in the aspect of forgiveness that we spoke about earlier. So
Yeah,
if you're not going to deal with them, then at least give forgiveness and move on.
exactly. No, it's very well said. Very,
So
very, very
Morley,
well said.
your new book is November.
November 11th. Yep.
We can still get the old one definitely on Amazon and from your website. I direct people to your Instagram all the time. I know you're not active there, but someone is.
Oh, yeah, there are quite a few people that are working in social media. But thank you. That's wonderful. And people can go onto the website, the rcp123.org, go to the resources tab. They can request the starter guide. They can join the RCP community. They can sign up for the training, the RCP Institute. And then for your followers who are really interested in a conversation, reach out to me with my email, morleyrobbins@gmail.com, or my phone, 847
You'll regret
922
that.
8061. No, I do it all the time. I get between 3 and 5 calls a week, which is fine. I'm very happy to be of service, and people are very gracious with they're very mindful of the vulnerability that I put myself in by
Dr.
giving.
Platt does that as well. He gives his number to everyone. So
Yeah,
I'll put all the links below. I'll look for that video you were discussing vitamin D and I'll put that down as well for people to check out.
yeah, I think
It's
I would really enjoy that.
it's been a pleasure. Let me know when your empty
Well,
iron containers are.
I absolutely will let you know at the very first sight of it. So it should be coming any day now, I would think.
I have another question for you, but I'm just going to email it to you and then you can respond and I'll tell people what you say.
You sure?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. It's
Okay.
not a
All
big deal.
right.
I got all my
Okay.
important. I'm sure you'll be back. I can't seem to get rid of you.
I appreciate the opportunity, and obviously, as people have questions, we can fold those into the conversation as well.
Okay. Have a good day, Morley. We'll chat soon.
Thank you so much. God bless.
Ciao.
Take care. Bye bye.